to Faculty's View from Case Western Reserve University School of Law. I'm Alpha Sahr Taylor, a third-year law student, a member of the Jessup International Law Moot Court team, and the Black Law Student Association. Today I have here with me Professor Michael Benza. Professor Benza teaches criminal law and criminal procedure 1 and 2. He is an expert on death penalty law and has argued before the United States Supreme Court. Thank you, Professor Benza, for being here today.
My pleasure to be here.
Great. Today, we're going to discuss the Tamir Rice case. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old African-American boy, was shot and killed by a Cleveland police officer while carrying a toy gun. Obviously, because of his age, and some will argue because of his race, this case has stirred a lot of controversy and protest here in Cleveland and around the country. Professor Benza, given that Ohio is an open carry state, that is, an individual with the legal right to carry the gun can carry that gun in open public, with some exception, of course,
Yes.
without being arrested or prosecuted, then how is it that a 12-year-old African-American boy gets shot and killed for carrying a toy gun?
Well, one of the critical distinctions in an open carry state is what was reported to the police officers in the Tamir Rice case. And that is, they were not just told that there was a person with a gun at the park, but that there was a person with a gun who was pointing it at people, threatening people, and making people afraid. So that changes the understanding of the police officers about what kind of call they are responding to. If it was simply a call that says there's a man with a gun, they would probably approach that situation quite differently than they approached with a report that there was a person threatening people with a gun.
Okay. Some have argued that Tamir Rice, his race played a key factor in how the officers responded to the shooting and how the case was ultimately handled. What is your take on that?
I think race most definitely does play a part in police use of force cases and in the decisions of prosecutors whether to pursue charges or not. That being said, that doesn't necessarily make the officers improper or racist in using race as one of their factors in deciding what they are going to do. It does, however, require that we have a broader discussion about the role of race and policing in this country.
This issue about race and the police use of force, in some cases excessive and deadly force, it's nothing new. It has been going on for decades. Why are we discussing this more frequently now?
The primary reason that we are talking about this now, and you're right, this problem, this issue has been around for over 150 years in our country, of certain groups feeling oppressed or abused by law enforcement on the basis of race or poverty or other issues. The difference now is that we are now able to see more police interactions when it comes to the use of force than we ever were before. In the past, we didn't have video cameras everywhere. We didn't have cell phones. We did not have body cameras on officers. We didn't have dash cams in the police cars to record what was happening. And so when you had a use of force case, what you would have is the officer's version of the events. And if the person was killed, nobody to speak about what was happening from that person's perspective. And so you ended up in this position where the prosecutors would want to investigate. They would ask the officers what happened. The officers would explain why it was that they used force. That explanation would be logical, would be lawful, and the case would go no further. The difference today is we now have video that comes back and shows us what in fact is happening. And in several cases, what the officers report is happening and what the video shows are not the same thing.
We have seen the Tamir Rice shooting video, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers have seen that video. How is it that with that video, we don't have an indictment in this case? Could you please explain how the Ohio grand jury process works and how it affected the outcome in this case?
Sure. So generally, the rules before the grand jury are pretty liberal in favor of what the prosecutor is allowed to do. Ohio does not have a lot of rules that control what has to happen in front of a grand jury. And so typically what happens is a prosecutor will come in, present the evidence that shows that the defendant is guilty, and then ask the grand jury to return the indictment. That's in a typical case. This case was different, although being different doesn't necessarily make it improper. In this case, the prosecutor decided to both present the video and other evidence that may have supported an indictment, but also chose to present evidence that would support a decision not to bring charges. That difference is why this case is getting so much attention. The fact that this case was not treated as a normal criminal case, because it was an officer use of force case, because of the profile of the case, that changed how the grand jury was given the case, but doesn't mean necessarily that what was going on in front of the grand jury was improper. So the reason that you look at it now and say the grand jury didn't indict, as compared to just looking at the video and seeing clear evidence of crime, is that the grand jury was looking at the case in a much broader context than the grand jury normally does. And in fact, the prosecutor specifically asked the grand jury to take into consideration the fact that the prosecutors did not believe that they could actually even get a conviction, even if the indictment was returned. Now, there's nothing improper about that, but again, being different without any other explanation for why this case would be different is one of the reasons there's so many different reactions to it.
The issue of the police use of force against African Americans, it's not just an African American issue. It is an American issue. And we as a people have a problem whenever a certain group of people start to lose faith in the ability of our judicial system to render justice. How can we solve this problem?
Well, there's a number of different ways that we should be looking and talking about this issue. And we're actually taking those first steps now. The fact that we are talking about officers' use of force, the fact that the Department of Justice has come into the city of Cleveland and entered into a consent decree to monitor what the police are doing, those factors will start to make changes. But we also have to have a broader discussion in this country about race, about the role of law enforcement, and about the relationship between police and the communities that they serve. If we have those discussions, the law will come along with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Professor Benza, and thank you to our viewers for watching.